Hey there, it's Critter Trades here, and I'm going to go over the 5 car trends that I dislike the most. So I'm going to get right into this. Most of these have to do with safety, a few of them don't, but yeah, we're going to get right to the list. So my first one is A-pillars that are way too big. And I see this a lot on SUVs particularly, and I kind of get why they are going towards this route with newer cars, especially with SUVs, and they have a much higher chance to roll over in a crash. And so to have a beefier A-pillar helps to protect occupants for a rollover crash, which is good, but it really restricts your visibility and it adds a large blind spot in the front of the car. And I noticed this especially on our Jeep. We have a Grand Cherokee, and not only is it just that the A-pillars are really bulky, the setup of where the mirrors are located and what is next to the mirrors really blocks a lot of your view. And the best way I can describe this is I remember specifically one time I was driving and I was going through an intersection. I didn't have a stop sign, and I was going and I come up to the stop sign, and all of a sudden when I get up to it, I noticed that there was a full-size school bus stopped there at the light. The timing from when it was driving, it was like matching exactly where my A-pillar was the whole way, and so I lost a school bus in the A-pillar. That's how big it was. And another spot where it's really common to have issues with it is when you're making like a left turn and you have to watch out for pedestrians. You have to do this movement with your head as you're going to make sure that you don't have a pedestrian in your blind spot, because it's really easy to lose them. So that's one thing I really don't like about them. Some cars are pretty good about it, obviously, smaller cars where they don't have to worry too much about rollovers, and they add a little glass window in behind the mirror to help with the visibility there. So some cars are okay about it, but a lot of the SUVs are starting to get really bad about that A-pillar size. My next one is not a safety issue, but I think manufacturers not moving towards CVT transmission sooner is one of the trends that I don't really like. And the reason is because most people can't tell or don't even know that what transmission is in their car, and they don't care really. And the reason I really like CVTs is because they're really smooth, and they again they're super smooth, and they're very efficient too. And I think if manufacturers would have moved towards them sooner, they would have been able to develop the technology for them a little bit better to make them a little more reliable, and so people wouldn't be as worried about them or have that stigma that they have about reliability. So I wish that manufacturers would have moved towards CVT transmissions rather than regular automatics sooner. My next one on the list, this is a big one that I really dislike, is touchscreens in cars. Now, I will say this with a caveat, because I don't mind touchscreens for certain things. I think you need to have some of the controls that you use most often, like your heat and air conditioning and radio controls. I think those should be required to be on a specific physical button. And the reason is because you use those way more than any of the other things that you will use in your car. And so when you're driving down the road, you're looking at the road, if you reach down to your touchscreen to try and change settings, you can't feel where the buttons are with your hand alone. You have to actually look down at the screen. And some cars have different menus where you have to click through a few different menus to change settings. And that just it's way too distracting for what it needs. Have a simple button, at least for the heat, the air, maybe the heated seats, the radio, that sort of stuff. So again, you can just feel down. You can tell if your finger's touching the knob. You can tell if your finger's touching the right button, that sort of thing. I think maybe one thing that I might add in the future would be really cool is tactile touch screens that have like almost like buttons on them. I think it'd be really cool if they added that feature so you don't have to take your eyes off the road to feel what you're touching on the touch screen. Or maybe even have it vibrate a little in different spots so you can feel where you're at on those touch screens. Or an audible tone would be even better too. My next car feature that I really don't like is putting large rims and small profile tires on SUVs. And it kind of defeats the purpose of an SUV. They market an SUV as you can take a lot of stuff and you can go anywhere. Now, most people don't, and I think that's kind of why they lean towards the larger rims on these cars. Most people keep them on paved roads, but if you want to go on a dirt road or a bumpy road or off-roading or down a driveway that maybe wasn't plowed or maybe wasn't paved, then you're going to want a little bit beefier tires on your car. So again, so you don't damage your rims, so you don't blow a tire. And I think that adding low profile tires to SUVs is kind of one of those silly things that's just for image to make the car look better, but it doesn't change the functionality. And the other thing about SUVs is I think of an SUV as like a comfortable, cushy ride. And when you put low profile tires on it, it makes the ride a little bit harsher. And adding larger rubber, larger tires makes a softer ride. And I actually usually put smaller diameter rims on my cars for winter specifically when I know it's going to get really bumpy. So I think that's kind of one of the silly trends that I really don't like. And my last car trend that I very, very, very dislike, this is probably my most annoying one, is automatic headlights. Now, I think automatic headlights are a good thing. I think they're implemented very poorly. And one of the reasons that this has been such a problem is due to the fact that a lot of gauge clusters have been changed to screens. And now in the old days when your gauge cluster was not a screen, it was just a backlighted physical gauges, like actual dials. In the daylight, you can see your gauges, so they don't need to be lit up. Now, if you have a screen there, when it's really bright outside, it makes it harder to see a screen, so they need to make it even brighter. Now, if you're riding your car at night, your gauge cluster will be lit up very bright like it's the day because you don't have your headlights on. And so, again, old cars, they only would illuminate when your headlights were on. So it kind of tricks people into thinking, oh, my gauge cluster's on, I can see it, so my headlights must be on, when that is not always the case. If you have automatic headlights, yes, if it's very dark, they will be on. But in certain situations, specifically when it's rainy or snowy, the headlights won't come on just because your windshield wipers are on. Some cars are set up that way, but not all of them. And I think that what they need to do to fix this problem is I think they need to mandate that headlights always be on with the option to turn them off. And I think a really cool option would be that every time you restart your car, if your headlights are in the off position, on restart, it turns them back on. So if you want to turn them off specifically, you can, but if you forget in poor conditions or light scenarios that aren't going to turn on your automatic headlights, they'll be on anyways. And those are the 5 worst car trends that I dislike the most, and I wish they are going to go away, but they're not going to go away, let's be honest. Thanks for watching. Have a good one.